want to start the discussion with Dr. Smith, if possible. What we've seen here is a number of different asset owners that impact a airport, the electricity, the transportation, and I wonder how you think ISO 55000 can help you interact with the other asset providers. Are you working with your electric suppliers for ISO, or the water suppliers, the MARTA, et cetera? Is there some kind of overlap?
There hasn't been to date, Mike. We haven't worked with those partners that connect within the airport itself. We have worked primarily with our partners that help us from the company execute our fiduciary requirement to our shareholders, the maintenance providers. But to your point, let me answer it at a higher level. Those organizations, I would push and support and assist and help them with implementing ISO in their different jurisdictions, because it ultimately impacts and helps the airport. So if I can get the Department of, or DOT, Department of Transportation, if I can get MARTA, if I can get those other entities that tie into us to implement the ISO concept within their own organizations, it's a huge benefit. And it's one of those things where all ships rise with the same tide. The better they get at doing what they do, the better they can provide the airport with what we need.
Dragan, do you interact with any of your customers on an ISO 55000 level?
Given that we are not certified ISO 55000, but we interact with our clients and suppliers also at that level, in particularly in this COVID-19 situation, it is a special case, so that we collaborate at this level in order to align our strategies.
Excellent. Amelia, you pointed out a issue of asset owner having problem with their information management. Now, you heard a little bit about LEN and what they're doing, and they even have an information strategy as part of their strategic asset management plan for their ISO. Not that you're, in charge of this, but do you see a value in having information management as a title for someone in agencies?
I guess that depends. I mean, there are various ways that you could do that. Information management could be a title, yes. It could be done through different offices, but certainly one of our characteristics is having quality data, having quality information. So you can't possibly manage assets if you don't have good information about them. That was the point that we made in this report, and also in our first report. There's no way to manage your assets if you don't know, how much you're using them, their age, the quality, a number of factors. And that's what we found at the FDA. Even though it was personal property, you need to know the same thing about infrastructure, facilities and real property as well. So whether it's a quality information person, an information officer, or someone else who's doing other things as well, I think a lot of it has to do with technology and having the technology to keep track of that information.
Len, what kind of technologies do you use to help the different departments that you serve?
So Maximo is our enterprise asset management system. Data Splice is our mobility platform. We use a lockout tagout system. We use SAP for our financials and inventory management, just to name a few.
And go ahead.
Do you, so an authority is not really, I'm familiar, I used to work for OMB in New York City, so I'm familiar with the Power Authority, but you're not really a government entity. You have more flexibility in terms of the technology you're able to acquire?
Yeah, we like to be called a quasi-state agency. And yes, we do have latitude as to what technologies we use. Some are requirements from the state, as an example, our fleet management system. But for the most part, we do have latitude in that area.
So that's one of the differences between a federal agency and a non-governmental agency.
Mhm. Len, how do you and Mildred interact on information exchanges? Do you?
We do. We're both part of the IAM New York chapter, so we've exchanged information through that as a forum. We've given presentations, and we also have talked a little bit about our enterprise asset management systems with Mildred as well, and how we're pursuing it, different areas around it as well.
Right. There's a lot of information sharing between us with NYPA, the Port Authority, for example, other entities in New York, because it's the same model. Asset information is key, also from an MTA perspective. And we deal with the FDA all the time because we get federal grants, right? And there's a requirement to put together a TAM plan. And that requires asset information really to be maintained over time in order to be able to develop your strategies, right? So what's really interesting is that I know that working with the Power Authority, they focused on asset information and really building that model out, which is phenomenal. I mean, we were like in awe in what they've been able to do. We focus much more on organization and strategy, right? Which is a very different focus. And now we're just getting into really building out the system and the asset information and tying that all together. So we also have developed asset information standards now. Like, we're further along in that journey, but not anywhere near where NYPA is, right? We'd like to get to where NYPA is, because once every entity in the New York area has similar levels of maturity, the language of ISO 55000 is universal. It doesn't matter what sector you are, you're able to communicate right along those lines, even though you may have different businesses and different perspectives. It brings you all together, and I think that is really wonderful to have. So that we're striving to do this approach.
Yeah, and I think to the point Mildred made, we're very lucky that those that came before us had the foresight to see things like having one enterprise asset management system, Maximo, across all of NYPA. So generation, transmission, facilities, all one version of Maximo, same version. Everything, we have an asset maintenance manual, which is our governing document on how we do things, represented by each of our facilities. So we have governance, we have system, and we really pull it all together to have what we need to do to move forward. That's one of the things the auditors were impressed in when they came, that we have that standardization across all of our different entities.